Hi everyone, this is Masei Seki from Imaginism Studios. I'm a character designer and illustrator for film, TV, and book publishing. Have you ever looked at a bird and thought how fascinating they are? These amazing creatures live worldwide and range in very different sizes, from a 2-inch hummingbird to a 9-foot ostrich. Each and every type of bird has their own physical composition that's truly unique, which as an artist makes for an exciting challenge. Our feathery friends are quite complex when it comes to the skeletal and muscular structure, as well as the formation of their wings and feathers. So for an artist, to create an accurate representation of birds will need much attention to the details. In this video, I'll be guiding you with a step-by-step tutorial on how to draw a side view of a bird. Today, I'll be using an American robin as an example. I'll start off by briefly going over the anatomy of a bird, to get a better understanding of what's under all their fluffy feathers. Then I'll explain the 6 major body parts as an underdrawing. I'll carve out the mass and structure of the bird. And lastly, I'll draw in the details such as the facial features, feet, and most importantly, the feathers. And I'll also be throwing in some tips on how to draw the wings opened. As you follow this tutorial, I would highly recommend having a reference photo by your side to observe subtle angles and details that can be easily missed. Before we get started on the drawing, let's get a better understanding of how the bird functions. If you didn't know, most animals have a similar body structure to the human body, even birds. But the reason why birds look the way they do is because they are highly adapted for flight. One key adaptation is the fusion of their bones, such as their collarbone, and their hips, which are fused to their spine. These fusions of the bones actually help the birds withstand the stress of taking off, flying, and landing. Another adaptation is their keeled sternum, also known as their breastbone. The keel is attached and acts as an anchor to the wing muscles, providing adequate leverage for flight. But the keel is absent in flightless birds like penguins and ostriches. So a pretty common misunderstanding about birds are its legs. It's often thought that their knees bend backwards, but in fact, on most birds what we see and consider as legs are actually the joints of the heel and toes. When a bird uses its legs, it's designed to move mainly at the knees. Their hips don't rotate like ours do because of the fused hip, so their knee acts as a hip joint, and that is where the bending happens. And if you look at a bird's neck, it's fairly long compared to ours. They actually have more bones in their necks so that the extra joint allows them to freely move their head in different directions, and also allowing them to reach down to pick up food from the ground. Now that we understand the structure of the bird, let's start off by blocking in some shapes. All birds have the same basic skeletal structure, but with different variation in size and shape, depending upon the species. One way I like to simplify the skeletal structure is to divide it into 6 different parts: the head, beak, neck, torso, legs, and wings. Doing so will make it easier to draw any type of bird just by changing the proportions of each part. First, let's start off with the torso. Since the hip is fused with the spine, we'll group it all together to form a simple shape. Draw a big round oval and we'll divide it in the center horizontally and vertically like a cross. This will help later on finding landmarks on the body. Then draw a circle for the head, roughly half the size of the oval. When you place the head, gauge how far it'll be depending on how long the bird's neck is. But for this robin, let's not draw it too far from the body. So from the head, let's draw in a curved neck attached closely to the top of the oval. Now that the head is attached, let's indicate the beak and tail. Following the dividing lines, let's extend them out and form a balloon shape to find the overall shapes. Depending on which bird you're drawing, the length and size will vary, so be aware of the proportions because it can make your bird look very different. The hip is roughly located in the top right quarter of the torso, but as I explained earlier, the movement of the leg doesn't come from the hip, but mainly the knees and ankles. So we'll just draw where the knee starts to simplify things. Taking the center of the torso, the knee will drop back to the ankle and go forward to the toes. The length of these 2 lines should be roughly the same. Draw in the toes with a simple line slightly facing out and away from the body. This will indicate the middle of the toe placement. Then add the inner and outer toes, a bit shorter than the middle one. Lastly, let's indicate where the arms are. At the top of the oval, place the shoulder joint, relatively close to where the neck is connected. From the shoulder, draw the arms coming back down to the elbow. The forearm will be much longer as it reaches the wrist, and from the wrist, add the short fingers back down. Now that we drew in the skeletal structure, let's mass out the body. Let's start off from the head and connect it to the body. For our robin, draw the top of the head, known as the crown, along the circle with a slight curve. The nape of the neck comes straight down halfway to where the body will connect. Start a new line from the back with a subtle curve along the torso all the way down to the tail. Moving on to the neck, follow the same direction as the nape and stop at its breast, roughly where the top of the oval is. The breast and belly has a bulbous look, so let's make it round and curved out all the way to the undertail cover. So back up to the head, draw the eye in the corner of the top left quarter of the circle. Draw the beak by finding the overall shape, carefully observing the subtle curves and angles. For a robin, the beak is rounded at the top and slightly curved at the bottom, and the beak will end all the way to the eyes. Back to the tail, the undertail cover has a slight bump before reaching the tail, and from here, add a long rectangular shape for the tail feathers. Making our way back to the legs, let's make an overlap over the body to add some perspective to it. And here, add an overlap with the flank, an area that consists of long feathers covering the leg above the heel. The leg continues down like a thin twig, and from the bottom, let's add the toes in. When you draw out the toes, draw them as thin tubes, and as it gets closer to the tip, it curves upwards and has a bulb at the end. Lastly, let's add in the wings. From the shoulder, connect the wing to the wrist. Swoop all the way back to the tail, a bit out of the body, to block in the long feathers. And complete the shape by drawing in the back of the wing connected close to the shoulder area. So now that we're done drawing in the mass and the shape of the robin, let's add some details. So for the crown and nape, we'll follow the underdrawing. And for the beak, indicate the nose just where the beak and the head meets. On the lower part of the beak, it also has an indent where the beak and head meets. Follow the rest of the underdrawing, and draw some feathers in areas that would stick out. For the toes, the joints are pretty bony, so draw them a bit more rigid. Following the form of the toes, draw some lines wrapping around to make them look more like bird feet and also adding some dimension to them. At the tip of the toe, etch in some thin, sharp claws curving outwards. And repeat everything for the back feet. Draw some beady eyes with a dark round pupil and a very small highlight. And lastly, add layered feathers to the tail. So before we get to the wings, here's a little diagram I created to show you that the wing comes in 3 major sections: the scapulars, secondaries, and primaries. This is where the bone structure is located in the wing. If you look at the feather direction, they are anchored from the structure of the wings. Secondaries come from the arm, and the primary feathers come from the hands. And if you break it down further, each section has 3 layers of wings. So if you imagine the arms folding in and resting, the feathers will fold and overlap like a fan. In a way, it'll tuck itself away neatly. So let's draw the 3 major sections first. First, let's draw in the scapulars. When the bird is in a resting position, the wings will tuck itself under these scapulars. And from here, draw the layers of the wings. And as you're drawing this, make sure you're following your photo reference, because making it up from your head will result in stiff and repetitive feathers, or it can even look messy and unorganized. Looking at reference, you'll spot the variety in lines and direction of the feathers. So when I was drawing these feathers, I didn't want to make it look complicated and messy, so I drew thinner and lighter lines to suggest these overlaps. And as a final touch, add some darker lines for more prominent overlap, and a few short lines around the body to indicate fluffy feathers. And that's how you draw a bird. As an extra tip, I'll show you how to draw the wings spread open. When you look at a wing from under, it has less layers than the top. Just like the wings closed, we want to draw the skeletal structure of the wing. Make sure the lengths of each section stays consistent. From here, let's draw the shape of the wing. On the undersurface of the wing, I'll only draw 2 sections divided by the wrist joint. And from here, there are 2 visible layers of the feathers overlapping. It has long primary and secondary feathers, covered by the wing lining, which consists of smaller feathers. One thing to keep in mind is that when the wings are spread out, you can think of the wings anchored at the wrist joints and arms, just like this. And from here, add the details of the feathers. Once you're drawing the entire wing, don't forget to draw the back wing. And you're all done. And if you really want to achieve the characteristic of the bird you're drawing, study and fill in the color and patterns of their feathers. This will really make your drawing stand out more, and the bird is more identifiable. When you get an understanding of how birds are structured, it'll be easy for you to draw any type of bird you want. Just like identifying the make and model of a car, some characteristics are important for one bird, while other features would be more important to another. By taking the basic knowledge that I covered, just by changing the proportions, you can draw any bird you like. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a bit more about our feathery friends. If you really want to improve your bird drawing skills, study them more in depth and observe the difference between other birds. So don't stop here. Keep studying, keep drawing, and most importantly, have fun with it. Thanks for watching, and until next time.